Bonjour et bienvenue tout le monde. Hi and welcome everyone to a Speech Bubble Languages French Language Clinic. This language clinic focuses on regular present tense verbs. So let's get started. As always, we like to check that we know what we mean by the expression verb. So a verb is a word that is used to describe an action, a state, or an occurrence. Lots of people refer to verbs as being doing words. A little bit general, but yes, that's true. An action, a state, or an occurrence. Let's see if you can spot the verb in these sentences in English, just to make sure you know exactly what we're referring to. Can you find the verb in each one? Okay, so we have the verbs eat, play, buy, travel, studies, and are. I hope you managed that okay. So, verb conjugation is what we are really focused on today. To describe what we and others do, we need to know how to form a verb. This is known as verb conjugation. We do verb conjugation in our mother tongue without even realizing it. For example, we would say, I speak, you speak, but we would then say he, she speaks, we speak, or you or use, I shouldn't say, speak and they speak. You can see that we change pronouns, I, you, and he and she, according to who's doing the speaking. And also the spelling of the word speak changes all the way down there too. So here are some examples of French verbs. They are shown in the form that they would be found in the dictionary. This is also known as the verb in its infinitive form. You can try to say them after me. Parler, critiquer, bavarder, danser, défendre, choisir, ignorer, dessiner, finir, écouter. Do you know the English for them all? Check how you've done. Is this what it would be you'd said? Bravo. So taking a good look at this list of verbs in their infinitive formats, there is a way of grouping French verbs. How many groups of verbs are there in French? If you don't know this already, a tip here would be for you to look at the last letters of the verbs in their infinitive format. Can you spot how many groups there are? There are 3. So the infinitive is the verb as you find it in the dictionary, you know, the verb before we do anything to the verb. For example, in English, to play, to buy, to study, to eat, to go out, to think, to sing. We don't know who's doing those activities yet, don't we not? We don't know when those activities, those actions are taking place. So this is the infinitive. The options here are infinite as to who could be doing these activities and when they take place. And verbs in French are split into 3 groups, according to the last letters of those infinitives. If you spotted them correctly in the previous screen, the last letters of the infinitives can be either ER, IR, or RE. So let's think a little bit more about how we conjugate a verb. We ask ourselves, well, firstly, who is doing that action? Je is a word we would be familiar with. I. Is it tu? Is it you doing the action? Perhaps it's il or elle. Is it he or she doing that action? What about on, one, or we, people in general? It could be nous, is it we? Are we all doing that activity? Or vous, Is that you? Perhaps it's il or elle, they, that are doing that activity and you're not involved. Je, tu, il, elle, on, nous, vous, il and elle. Let's take a look then at what happens to the verb. Verb, parler, is the verb we're going to use to help us uncover these patterns. Just as in English, the end of the verb changes depending on who's doing that. The first thing that we do to an ER verb is to remove the ER ending. So parler becomes parle. Now what we do is we add on the letters for each person who is doing that activity. If you remember the list of people we looked at, I, you, he, she, we, you, they and they. Je, tu, il, elle, on, nous, vous, il and elle. Let's see what letters we add on to the verb to complete that conjugation. Je parle, add an I. Je parle. Tu parles, add an IS. Tu parles. Il parle, adding an E, and the same for elle, and the same for on. Il parle, elle parle, on parle. What letters do we add for the next stages of our conjugation? Nous, we add on an ONS. Nous parlons. Vous, we need to add an EZ. Vous parlez. Then for il and elle, we add on an ENT. Il parle, elle parle. Let's take a little look at that all together. I, you, he, she, we, you, they, and they. Je parle, tu parles, il parle, elle parle, on parle. Nous parlons, vous parlez, il parle, elle parle. This is an ER verb, fully conjugated. The verb we've used is parler, to speak in French. I speak, you speak, he, she, it speaks. So if you we speak, you speak, and they speak. You might have noticed that several of the verbs sound exactly the same, no matter how the verb ending is spelled. Je parle, tu parles, il, elle, on parle, nous parlons, vous parlez, il parle, elle parle. Let's try an activity to see if you can apply that rule of conjugation to these other ER verbs. Pause the video here as you work your way through this task. Let's check our responses. Je danse, tu joues, il parle, il travaille, on regarde, j'aime, remember that lovely E disappears here. Elle dessine, vous coupez, nous habitons, j'étudie. Again, the little extra E vanishing there. Ça va? How did you do? Let's see whether you're happy as well to turn sentences into negatives too. Can you add the not or never to those sentences? For example, je ne danse pas and tu ne joues jamais. Again, pause the video here as you work your way through the remaining activities. Okay, let's check how you've done. Il ne parle jamais. Il ne travaille pas. On ne regarde jamais. Je n'aime pas. Elle ne dessine jamais. Vous ne coupez pas. Nous n'habitons pas. And je n'étudie jamais. Okay, so we've got that lovely ER verb pattern down, haven't we? We've done some practice. We know we can get it right. But remember, there are 3 groups of verbs. ER ending verbs, IR, and then RE. So let's take a look at the pattern for the other 2 groups. We're starting with the group of IR verbs. We're going to use the verb Finir, to finish, to help us look at the conjugation. We have our lovely personal pronouns, je, tu, il, elle, on, nous, vous, il, and elle, down the left-hand side there, ready and waiting. So what do we do to IR verbs to conjugate them? Well, first thing we do, remember, is to take off that IR. That leaves us with fin, F-I-N. Let's take a look at the spell ending, shall we? Je finis, I-S. Tu finis, I-S. Il, elle, on finit, IT all the way down. Nous finissons, ISS-ONS. Vous finissez, ISSEZ. Ils finissent, ISSENT. And elles finissent, ISSENT. Je finis, tu finis, il, elle, on finit. Nous finissons, vous finissez, ils finissent, elles finissent. Again, a few of those sounding the same regardless of how they are written. Let's try some IR verbs, shall we? Here are our IR verb lists we're going to work with. We have finir, to finish, choisir, to choose, réussir, to succeed, rougir, the verb to blush, and obéir, to obey. Can you conjugate those infinitives to give the French for numbers 1 through to 5? Don't forget to remove the IR first before you add the correct endings on. Pause the video here as you work through that task. Okay, corrigeons. Let's get correcting. I choose, je choisis. She succeeds, elle réussit. They obey, ils obéissent. We finish, nous finissons. And you are blushing. Tu rougis. Ça va? How did you do? I hope you did well. So finally, let's take a look at our last group of verbs, the ones that have RE on the end of them in their infinitive. We're going to use the verb vendre, to sell, to help us learn this pattern. Pronouns are ready and waiting. Je, tu, il, elle, on, nous, vous, il, elle. Let's see how the verbs with RE endings in the infinitive are conjugated. Je vende. Tu vendes. Il, elle, on vend. Nous vendons. Vous vendez. Ils vendent. Elles vendent. So for RE ending verbs, we have S, S, then nothing added on for the 3 in the centre there. ONS, EZ, ENT, ENT. Again, several of these sound the same when they're spoken aloud, even though the spelling might be slightly different. Je vende, tu vendes, il, elle, on vend, nous vendons, vous vendez, ils vendent, elles vendent. So let's apply those rules we've just been learning. Vendre, attendre, entendre, perdre, and prétendre. Can you apply your conjugation patterns to give us the French for numbers 1 through to 5? Pause the video here as you work through this. Okay, she waits for, elle attend. I hear, j'entends. We sell, nous vendons. They lose, ils perdent. And you claim, vous prétendez. Ça va? How did you do? Ça va bien, j'espère. I hope you did well. So to finish off this language clinic, let's take a look at all of our verb conjugations and line them up side by side. Here are our 3 helper verbs: parler for our ER grip, finir for our IR, and vendre for our RE verbs. Say them along with me. Je parle, tu parles, il, elle, on parle. Nous parlons, vous parlez, il, elle parle. Je finis, tu finis, il, elle, on finit, nous finissons, vous finissez, ils, elles finissent. And finally, je vends, tu vendes, ils, elles, on vend, nous vendons, vous vendez, ils, elles vendent. It's really important that you take time to memorize the verb conjugation patterns for our regular verbs, ER, IR, RE. Once you have those memorized and you've practiced lots with them going in and out of the French and English, then you'll be ready to look at some verbs that don't follow those patterns. As always with language learning, there are a few verbs that misbehave and break those rules. But at this point in time, focus on these, memorize those endings, try them both in written and spoken format. Bonne chance, bon courage, good luck everybody. To finish off then, here are some quiz questions. Can you remember the personal pronouns? What's an infinitive? How many groups of verbs are there? Would you be able to describe the steps to conjugating a verb to someone else? If you were talking about yourself, did you see what the verb ending usually has? But what about those endings for each of the verb groups? Have you memorized them yet? Bon, merci beaucoup, comme toujours. Thank you, as always, for joining us with our Speech Bubble Languages Mini Language Clinic. If you have any questions about your learning journey with us, don't hesitate to contact your tutor. We're always happy to hear from you and support you every step of the way. À bientôt. Au revoir.